Zach Cregger is the new hot thing in Hollywood, and his latest movie, Weapons, just came out over the past week. And because my husband is a movie junkie, I got taken to see it. Zach rose to prominence because of his work in the horror genre, which is admittedly not something I dip my toe into very often. But Weapons is both horror and comedy at the same time. So I agreed to go after my husband assured me there were no demons in it, because I have a hard policy against seeing anything with demonic activity going on. Too scary. And admittedly, after he told me about all the hype around it, I was very curious. Like, this movie, for a horror genre flick, seems to have immediately hit mainstream interest. There were lots of people that wanted to go see it. There were immediately tons of reviews. It was said to be really unique and different, so off we went. And I just have to say that upon seeing it, I immediately looked at my husband and said, I told you so. He is a movie watcher. He also writes scripts. He's working on some film projects himself. He is somebody that consumes information in that area. I'm more of a reader. And I've been telling him for literally the past 2 years that there is this device all of the authors are using right now for all of the top selling books. They almost to a one follow the exact same model. And I have been telling him he needs to start incorporating it in his scripts because people are eating it up like crazy. And I have to tell you, don't want to spoil this right away, but that is the exact device that Zach Cregger used in Weapons. And it is the sole reason, underline sole, the sole reason that people are talking about this movie. So I have to take a victory lap and talk about what this device is and why I think it is such a sham and an excuse for shoddy writing. First, I'm Hannah Cox. Welcome to my channel where I bring you politically homeless takes on politics and culture. If you're also politically homeless, take a second to join me here by subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell while you're at it so that you can stay up to date whenever I release a new video. And please also take a second to like this video and drop me a comment. Guys, I'm sorry for the delay in getting this video out there. I know I said on Friday that I would have a video on this subject over the weekend, but I became sick all of Saturday and Sunday. My stepkids have been back in school for no less than a week. And I am already sick because kids are germ terrorists and my immune system is still not built up over all these years. But I'm recovered now and I'm ready to talk about it. If you haven't seen the movie, spoilers ahead. I never understand when people get mad for spoilers while they're watching content about something they have not yet seen or read. But they do, so I'm issuing that notice now. So the movie Weapons uses everyday objects as, you guessed it, weapons, highlighting the potential for harm in seemingly harmless environments. Right out the gate, the movie starts a little bit differently than you might expect it to. There is no rising action. Like, right out the gate, the kids have disappeared. All of the kids except for one in the single teacher's classroom have vanished into the night. Nobody took them. All of their parents have them on Ring cameras, just waking up in the middle of the night and running out of their houses, never to be seen again. The one little boy who was not taken has no answers. He says he doesn't know what could be going on. And instead of using logic or reason, the townspeople decide that the teacher must be responsible for their kids voluntarily waking up and running out of their house because they have nobody else to blame. Now, I'll admit that the premise of this movie was interesting. It was a good enough hook that you really did become invested pretty quickly. It was sort of a whodunit, where did they go? There was immediate suspense, and it had a really talented cast. So I was drawn in. The thing that I thought was really interesting about this movie, and the one thing that I will say I walked away really liking about it, is that it had a lot of dark humor. Like, it was really good at mixing the horror genre with comedic relief. And I found myself and the rest of the audience around us laughing out loud a good bit. But as a whole, this movie had absolutely nothing to say and really nowhere to go. The big answer to the question that you watch the entire movie to get to is that the one little boy who did not disappear from the classroom had this sketchy aunt that showed up a few days before all the kids disappeared, and turns out she was a witch who needed to feed off little children to stay alive. Tale as old as time. So obviously, like from that ending and then the whole like the town's turning on the teacher, you have pretty familiar tropes, right? Women being burned at the stake and accused of egregious acts, even when they're innocent, and people not really caring to actually look into the facts of the matter. And then you have sort of the whole like witches need to live off like the blood of kids in order to survive. To me, there was a little bit of a metaphor there that he could have teased out more and maybe made this more interesting, where it's like the older generations that have been taking advantage of their socio-political system and weaponizing it in a way against younger generations are symbolic when you think of the witch needing the kids in order to stay alive. Like that made me think of old people who won't step back from power, particularly people in Congress, how older people will not hand over the reins to their companies. They won't sell their 5-bedroom houses, even though they're empty nesters, so that young families can afford a home. Like they are absolutely people who have taken everything for themselves and left scraps for the generations coming after them, and are even continuing to do that even now. But I don't even know that that was a point Zach Cregger was trying to make. It was all very surface. I think I just sort of went there. The only reason this film has gotten any traction at all, the only thing that makes it stand out is the way that he chose to tell the story. And this is what so many popular books have been doing for the past couple of years. Elin Hilderbrand is one example of a popular author who frequently employs this device. Some of her books like The Perfect Couple and 28 Summers have been absolute gangbusters. We've also seen other popular books that have topped the charts like The God of the Woods use the same device. I'm a voracious reader, and one thing that I tend to like to do to like turn my mind off is by, sort of trash on my Kindle and read it. I'm not talking about smut, okay? I don't read smut. I'm talking about just sort of light, mindless books like the ones I just listed. And at first, I found myself really liking this device. Like at first, you will not be able to put these books down until you start to see the trend. So here's what it looks like. The author will almost immediately set up a suspenseful story. Somebody's dead, somebody's missing, some kind of immediate suspense is introduced. And so your mind goes into a mode of needing to figure out the mystery. But the story is not told linearly. Instead, the stories tend to shift between various characters' perspectives and timelines throughout the book. That means sometimes you're moving forward, sometimes you're going back. You're getting little pieces of the story slowly until you finally get to the end and everything comes together. In the age of ADD and people having such limited attention spans, honestly, it's a pretty smart way to structure a book. It can feel like you're getting a lot of information when really you're not. And I think because it's shifting between timelines and between different people's perspectives, it keeps you from being able to guess and think ahead and predict very common tropes or stereotypes in storytelling that you might typically be able to piece together if it were being told in a traditional linear style. And that's what Weapons does, okay? He starts off with the perspective of the teacher. You're getting all of this through her lens. You're trying to figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the story jerks back and pulls you into the perspective of a different character starting all over from the top. And it does this about 5 or 6 times until you finally understand what has been going on all along. But ultimately, while this device definitely can keep your attention span locked in, once you get to the end, you often have this sense of being completely like fooled. Because never is the actual answer really that climatic or interesting. Never was the puzzle ever that intense. They were just scrambling it around and making it harder to put the pieces together. And that's why Weapons, I think, is not going to live up to its hype. I've already seen this online. I've already seen people on TikTok talking about this. They're saying that it is a story about nothing. And it absolutely is. There's very little character development. I even remarked to Logan halfway through the movie, I was like, I don't actually care about any of these people. I don't care about these kids. I don't care about these various adults who are involved because there was no development to make me care about them. The entire film rests on you trying to figure out what is happening. And when you get to the end of that and nothing really all that unique is happening, it is kind of a letdown. And that's why I say this is really sort of cheap storytelling. But I say that while acknowledging I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I loved in the Guardian's review, they said that the movie is in service of a magnetic drip feed mystery plot that unravels so compellingly that it takes us a while to notice how empty it all is. But that seems to be the trajectory of where Hollywood is going. They don't have anything to say these days, it seems. I am constantly going back and watching older movies and just marveling at their depth, the richness, the uniqueness to their stories, to their characters, even to their costume designs and settings. And I think it's actually quite depressing that we're in this place in entertainment where they don't really care about the art saying anything or really even having any sort of lasting impact on society. Like, can you even call that art at this point? And I know that it's popular for people on the left to point to this whole phenomenon, not just in movies, but across all of entertainment and art, and say that, like, this is because we're living in late stage capitalism. No, we're not. If anything, we're living in early stage socialism, and this is the result of it. Take Hollywood alone. Hollywood was overrun by the unions over the past couple of decades. They have driven up the price to make movies, making it so astronomically expensive to produce anything that two things have happened. First and foremost, a lot of production is getting pushed out of the country altogether, and that is still here becomes so much more difficult to take chances on because you're having to invest so much money to create something that is ultimately a risk. And so the studios don't do that. Over time, they start to look for surer and surer and surer ways that they can make a return on their investment because the investment they're having to make from the beginning is just too high to risk losing. That's why you see them constantly regurgitating old movies, doing tons of remakes, or sticking to one or two different kinds of genres like Marvel movies that they feel very confident will sell. And everything else is getting flatlined by that. We don't even get rom-coms anymore. The only musicals we get are things that have been massive Broadway hits for decades. And all of this traces back to the fact that the unions worked in tandem with leftists to essentially rid these sectors from an actual free market economy. They pushed protectionism. They tried to get rid of any kind of competition. They tried to drive up wages far above the value they were creating. And this is ultimately the end result. As I often say, you can manipulate reality for some time, but eventually the rubber band's going to snap back and hit you in the face. You are not going to outrun the realities of the laws of supply and demand. And it's actually infuriating to me that people look at this happening and they don't even do their due diligence to dig in and understand why it is. Instead, they just have this lazy knee-jerk reaction and say that it must be the results of capitalism. So as for me, I'm going to be sticking to books and old movies for the most part. I think this issue is only going to continue to get worse. We've seen it already get worse since the strikes by the writers union and the actors and directors unions like a year and a half ago. I don't see it turning around anytime soon, except for the fact that I think AI is likely about to wreck their industry. We're going to see something very similar happen, I think, in this industry as we saw happen in the music industry during the initial internet revolution, where all of a sudden the gatekeepers had their power stripped from their hands. People could make music without having to go into a studio and employ session musicians and hire top producers. It got to a point where people could even make whole albums on their computer. And not only could they make albums, they began being able to distribute them through things like Spotify and TikTok and YouTube so that they don't even need a record label anymore. I think hopefully that same thing is about to happen in movies, and nobody deserves it more. So I'm over here rooting for disruption. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video. Take a second to drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want even more content, you can head over to platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook to follow me. I post more regularly over there. And lastly, if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can subscribe to my Substack where I regularly release subscriber-only articles and I'm doing some private events. So head over to that link in my bio if you're interested.